Hey everyone, I wanted to share this video of Chuck Todd interviewing Representative Dan Bishop. Chuck Todd is just so clearly partisan and condescending in the full clip. You can watch the full clip if you want. I'll link to it in the description below. But I appreciated Dan Bishop's very polite, coherent response when he helped reframe Chuck Todd's biases. Now, there's a lot of good nuggets in this clip. Dan Bishop talks about Hakeem Jeffrey's speech and his view on that and all that. That was a good section too. But what I want to focus on this clip is this astounding question that Chuck Todd asked Dan Bishop, where Chuck Todd is basically suggesting that, hey, Democrats should keep power despite the Republicans having the majority in the House because the red wave was really a dud. We got a Democrat as president, and the Dems control the Senate. So really, the Republicans only control 1/6 of the United States government, but the Democrats have the Senate and the executive branch. So why don't you just acquiesce to whatever the Democrats want? And it was just such an astounding question. You're really gonna have to hear it to believe. And also that the way he presented the question was very sly. And I'm gonna go ahead and play the clip for you to just judge for yourself.
Do you accept the premise of majority rule? And I say that because 91% of the House Republicans wanted to elect Kevin McCarthy as Speaker for 3 days. 9% of you were holding it back, 91 to 9. And I ask that because you guys have control of 1/6, essentially, of government right now. If Democrats have majority in the Senate and Democrats have the White House, why shouldn't they have the lion's share of winning most negotiations?
So Chuck is very sneaky here, and let me explain what he just did. He just said, do you believe in majority rule? And at first, he's talking about the speaker election that we just had last week. But then he brings about the topic of the separation of powers out of nowhere. And this makes no sense for multiple reasons. The rules for electing a speaker are already majority rule. There are 435 members of the House, and a majority of the House would be 218 or greater. And if it were plurality rule, then of course the way the holdouts would have negotiated would have been differently to, of course, prevent Hakeem Jeffries from being speaker, right? But Chuck is confusing a majority in the caucus with the majority in the House because when it comes to the House and the way they vote, it's not based on political party. It's based on, you're an American first. You're not a Republican or Democrat first. You're an American first. And as an American, the House of Representatives vote for their speaker, and it's already majority rule. And Chuck Todd's statement just doesn't make sense. So what? The 20 holdouts should have just acquiesced and just joined the majority? That makes no sense. It's a rookie mistake. But Chuck Todd doesn't care about that. In actuality, Chuck Todd wants he believes, he doesn't care what a majority of the Republicans want. But he uses that question to segue to his actual point, which is why should Republicans control anything at all? They only control 1/6 of the government, and Joe Biden is in control of the executive branch, and the Democrats are in charge of the Senate. So, let Joe Biden do whatever he want, right? But his logic makes no sense. These are separate branches of government. Kevin McCarthy's authority is limited to the House, and of course, he can use that as leverage when he negotiates with Joe Biden and the Senate, of course. But Chuck Schumer and Kamala Harris lead the Senate, and as bad as I think they are, I understand that they have leverage, right? They are the ones in charge of the show over there. But Chuck Todd is saying, hey, even though the House has a majority of Republicans, really, we have the Senate. We have, Democrats have the House. You're still a minority of the government, so we should do whatever we want. Blah blah blah. This is one of the biggest hypocritical things Democrats believe. When they have power, anyone who is against them is an obstructionist. And, media will always fall in line and parrot whatever the Democrats want. Chuck Todd presents himself as a fair and objective person, even though his wife is a consultant for the Democratic Party. Uh, Now, when Trump was president, the Democrats were the resistance, right? Liberals were the resistance. They were a check on the federal government that was equal to the executive branch, right? Chuck Todd or anyone else in the media did not have this perspective that they have today, right? So when the Democrats took control of the House in after the 2018 midterms, even though Trump was president and the Senate still had a Republican majority, Chuck Todd and the rest of the mainstream media, none of them were saying like, "Oh, well, Trump's the president, Mitch McConnell's in charge of the Senate, Nancy Pelosi, why don't you just acquiesce to them?" No, of course, they were pushing her to lead the charge of the resistance. So, and again, I don't see Chuck Todd calling out Democrats for wanting to make all sorts of harmful changes like rules changes or, on how many members can vote to vacate the chair or, getting rid of the filibuster in the Senate. They use these things when it's to their benefit, but then when they are in the majority, they don't want to allow other people to use it. And again, he just can't hide his bias that he believes any form of Republican governing, even when it's a rhino governing, it's just illegitimate in his eyes. And again, he's just pushing them. Hey, why don't you just follow what the Democrats want? It is absurd that he would even ask this question. Now, I'm about to play you what Dan Bishop says. I think he does a great job answering the questions. And again, Kevin McCarthy, he obviously we watched what happened last week. He didn't win a majority of the House, right? The majority of what the Republicans want don't matter. It's the majority of the House, which is 218 if everyone votes. And last I checked, when Republicans had a complete government, Chuck Todd did not want Republicans to just fall in line with what the executive branch wants. So what I mean is this: like when Republicans had the House, Senate, and the executive, Chuck Todd is here telling Dan Bishop saying, "Hey, you're part of the House Freedom Caucus. You represent a minority, right? The majority is Democrat power. Why don't you guys just fall in line and do what the Democrats want?" But when the government was filled with Republicans, he was like hoping that Republicans would fight against other Republicans. He didn't want Republicans to fall in line with what the rest of the government wanted. He didn't want those minority Republicans to fall in line with what Donald Trump or Mitch McConnell wanted. He wanted Republicans to be divisive, like how they are right now, right? So the hypocrisy is just astounding. So let me just go ahead and play Dan Bishop's response.
Do you believe, Chuck, that by majority rule you mean that when a majority has decided something, or the plurality of a Republican conference, for example, the others should be told what to do? Is that what you're saying?
You get a vote, and you vote no. But if there are
Exactly. You get a vote.
218 members
He's
of Congress
stumbling.
that want to
Chuck
raise the
Todd is
debt
stumbling.
ceiling,
He knows
you
he's
can
called out.
object. But there might be 218 that want to raise the debt ceiling without trying to tank the government, without doing these spending cuts, want to do it cleanly. Will you respect that?
Oh, absolutely. If a majority decides to do something, that becomes the law. But the notion that people are going to be ordered what to do in order to get to that majority doesn't seem like the right play. If you're saying, on the other hand, should Republicans turn to Democrats or act as if Democrats are the majority and accede to their priorities for government in the House, no, that's exactly the opposite of what we should do. Republicans should make sure we fulfill our responsibilities to voters who elected a majority of Republicans. And I think what you've seen is that Democrats have shown greater will in previous times when we had divided government. That can't be the case. We've got to show will also on behalf of the voters that sent us to Washington to fight for them.
Yeah, I mean, he is obviously way more eloquent than I am. He said it so plainly. When the Democrats win in a divided government, there's no question they will fight on behalf of their voters. They will fulfill the mandate that their voters have placed in them. But Chuck Todd just doesn't seem to believe that these Republicans have any mandate at all, which is just astounding. I'm gonna keep going because Chuck Todd he asks another stupid question. But before I move on to the next clip, be sure to like and subscribe. Share this clip with your friends. I really appreciate getting to 1,000 followers, and I want to provide y'all with more content. So be sure to let me know what you think in the comments below. So this next section is also pretty annoying. Chuck Todd makes it seem that Republicans, they have no mandate because the GOP candidates who ran, who were kind of more right wing, kind of more like the House Freedom Caucus types, those who ran for the Senate races on similar platforms to what the Freedom Caucus wants, they were rejected at the ballot box. That's Chuck Todd's point. He just can't seem to believe that anyone would want to vote for Republican. And so his point is like, hey, maybe you got elected, but these other folks didn't get elected, so maybe you shouldn't exercise your mandate. And this is a big problem just for the American population because you have a major news media program on network television available to millions of people, and they are brainwashing the American public every Sunday, every day on the news to always question conservative motives, conservative government, but to think that the Democrats are pure and the good guys. And when Trump won in 2016, the media again they made excuses. Trump has no mandate. He didn't win the popular vote, of course. So that discounts, of course, that discounts that if the rules were different, then Trump would have campaigned a whole lot differently. They always want to change the rules after they didn't get the outcome they wanted. And then in 2021, when Glenn Youngkin beat former Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe, uh, because of the education issue, the media refused to believe it. They were saying like, "Hey, this is not legitimate," because the Virginia voters were tricked by conservatives into thinking there was like this big, education thing going on that isn't real. Even if it is real, what's the big deal? Never mind that the media just didn't report on a rape that happened by a trans student. They said it didn't happen, and then lo and behold, it happened, and then they just sweep that under the rug, right? So this is a trick commonly pulled, and I'm glad Dan Bishop has a solid counter for it. So I'm going to go ahead and play the question.
There were a lot of Republicans arguing what you were arguing on the campaign trail, and particularly in Senate races, but in many House races, they got rejected at the ballot box. Does the fact that voters rejected many members that share your point of view and at all impact on the fact that maybe you just need to go out there and campaign more, that you can't sort of hold a chamber hostage because you're not getting your way?
I didn't like this question. Hold a chamber hostage for not getting your way. These are legitimate rules and tactics for negotiation. Chuck Todd thinks it's not okay when the more conservative members employ these things, but when if a Democrat does them, he's got no problem, right? Democrats used filibuster hundreds of times when Trump was president, and they were the minority in the Senate. And now that the Democrats are the majority with 51 to 49, they want to all of a sudden abolish the filibuster, things like that. He doesn't consider it holding the rest of the chamber hostage or anything like that. This hypocrisy again, it's absurd and astounding, and it's so clear where his biases lie, and it's just amazing. I mean, it's actually quite sad that he has so much access and a platform to be streamed directly into millions of homes in America.
I think Democrats have gotten their way with great success. And I don't think your read of the election is right, Chuck. I think what people were looking for is Republican voters in particular, they wanted to be convinced that Republicans had conviction about what was being sold to them. They were uncertain about that. Now, I also don't disagree that at the margin, people want to have elected officials, they want their candidates, including Republican candidates, to exercise mature and reasoned judgment. But that doesn't mean to lie down and be rolled over by Democrats, whether they're in the majority or the minority. And so my view is we've had an opportunity to take a hard look at each other in the Republican conference over the course of this past week. Folks in the media constantly said, oh, it's dysfunction and chaos. No, it was deciding the most important questions about how this Congress is going to proceed, and we accomplished an enormous amount. As one very sophisticated person in this area observed, this agreement we received is transformational for Congress, and we're going to have a great and productive Congress.
All right. Well, I think Dan Bishop's response was really, really good. So I'm gonna leave this video at that. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Share with your friends. Thank you.